How do we begin to feel more alive? I am Dr. Kori Propst, the ground zero health psychologist committed to helping you rebuild your powerful life. And I'm also the creator of the Mental Edge Academy. In this third video of this 5-video series on why self-awareness, I want to share with you one strategy that you can use to begin really getting to know yourself. Here it is. Stop periodically throughout the day and do a self-time in. What does this mean? Well, so often in challenging situations, typically involving other people, we hear that if we're becoming distracted and incredibly emotional or flooded with intensity, that it would be best to take a time out. And that is very true. When we do become flooded, and this is a term in the literature, it actually means that the areas of our brains that detect threat are incredibly activated. Okay? So communication with the prefrontal cortex, which is this newest, most linear, most logical, most problem-solving part of the brain, isn't necessarily getting through. They're not talking back and forth about, well, maybe we should calm down here and what would be the best way to approach the situation. So taking a time out is really good advice. But here's the problem. And you tell me if this is your experience. When you take the time out, typically what happens is you're stewing and you're scheming about what the other person did wrong and what you want to say back. And it actually amplifies the negative emotion as opposed to allowing us to feel more expansive and open and curious, and then to be able to come back into the conversation with this greater sense of equanimity and peacefulness in order to be able to work through. So the message is this. Oftentimes what we need in situations like that is to go inward, because we typically will focus on, like I talked about in the video yesterday, we start blaming and we start looking at the outward circumstances and at other people and finding ways to make them the bad guy. And what I suggested yesterday was that we begin taking ownership and personal responsibility, which means we need to take that time in. Okay, so not time out, we need to go inward. The things to remember with this taking time in is emotions are never bad. Please burn that into your brains. Okay, emotions are never bad. It's about how we relate to the emotion and how we choose to respond in light of whatever emotion is present for us at that time. The second thing is that what we need when we do have, and when we do wave like that white flag, because yes, when emotions, like I said, rise above a certain intensity and meet a threshold, there's a high probability that we are going to react incredibly unskillfully and unwisely. What we need in those moments is to remove ourselves from the situation, but come back to home base. This is home base. We need to come back to our hearts and ground ourselves in our bodies, right? We don't want to run from what's happening. We want to run through and into what is right here. The idea is that we don't abandon ourselves in these moments of difficulty. So time ins, guys, are opportunities to be with and for ourselves rather than running away from ourselves and avoiding ourselves and whatever emotion and energy is there for us. And this is something that those with low self-awareness, they do quite often. They become very good at abandoning and avoiding themselves, especially in uncomfortable situations. Now, they're doing it unconsciously, but through the practice of self-awareness, this is what we can get better at doing. Not being adversaries with ourselves, but accepting and loving ourselves in a more skillful, wise way. So your time in is also a chance for you to notice the thoughts that your mind makes, okay? And here's my suggestion. We want to notice the thoughts themselves, the string of words, okay, as well as the types of thoughts that we have. As we're getting to know ourselves, how we operate, what we think about, how we think about things, we want to look at the thoughts themselves, notice them, observe them, but then also get a better sense of what types of thoughts they are. So, for example, you might notice the string of words, as I mentioned, kind of like our minds are a movie marquee, and we see the string of words running across the movie marquee. All right? The marquee says, "He's so stupid." All right? Those are the words. 4 words. He is so stupid. Okay? That's the thought itself. The type of thought is blaming. It's judging. It's defensive. So you might choose in this practice to sit for a time in when you're feeling challenged, when you're like, oh, this isn't cool, this is not good, this is uncomfortable, this is very unpleasant for me right now. When you feel defensiveness rise up, when you feel your body contract, okay, when you would call what's here negative and not okay. That's the time to go take a time in. Identify the thoughts running across the movie marquee of your mind and identify the type of thoughts they are. Now, here's another time you might choose to take a time in. When you're feeling somewhat neutral, okay? Then what do you notice moving across the marquee of your mind? Are there planning thoughts happening? Are there creative thoughts occurring? Maybe you notice overall fewer thoughts. I don't know. This is why you would take the time in to find out, okay? Or you could do a time in when you're feeling a sense of joy, when you're feeling a sense of expansiveness or openness. What's running across the marquee of your mind then? Are the thoughts dreamy? Are they future-oriented? Are they kind of scheming? Are they, maybe they're grandiose. Maybe they're really like fantasy driven. maybe they're personally inflating in some way. I don't know. So the point of this exercise, guys, is to become an observer, right? Typically our minds think a thought and it either leaves, it just goes right on by, like the movie marquee, or we fuse with it. We actually believe it. We take it as the truth. We think that the thought is us, much like we do with emotion. And then our actions and our behaviors are influenced. So if we can practice just noticing the thoughts, we can feel more in control and more alive in our lives. Thanks, guys.